You're listening to the Equine Forum on HRRN, presented by Twin Spires.
Neo Equo stretching out River Thames. Sovereignty warming to the task for Alvarado. He's on the far outside into third. Gate to Wire finds his best stride. Burnham Square's bid is stalled as River Thames has made a clear lead. Off the turn and the stretch drive in the Fountain of Youth. And River Thames, he has the lead by 2 with a 16th to go. Sovereignty begins to get on track, but time is ticking away. River Thames almost there. Sovereignty gonna dive at him late. Here comes Sovereignty! He got him too, did Sovereignty. He went from last to first to win under Junior Alvarado for Godolphin and Bill Mott. The Fountain of Youth from last to first to Sovereignty.
Welcome back to the Equine Forum presented by Twin Spires. Pete Aiello with the call of the Fountain of Youth and that perfectly timed ride in the Fountain of Youth by jockey Junior Alvarado aboard Sovereignty running down River Thames to take that race back on March 1st. Junior was all set to ride his Fountain of Youth winner in the Florida Derby on March 29th. When he was injured a few days before that race, he had to sit that one out. Manny Franco was the pinch hitter in the saddle. Sovereignty ran well, came up just a little bit short behind Tappan Street. Junior will be back aboard next Saturday in the Run for the Roses, and I know he's super pumped up about that, and I'm pumped up to have him with me here on the show. Junior, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Mark. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Really well, man. Let's talk about what you went through in those days before the Florida Derby. Man, that had to be just a gut punch for you.
Yeah, absolutely. You've been working, building up this, having one of the best horses going into the Derby, going into, a great one for the first time with this horse. And, like the last race, Sunday, have that little incident with my horse. Have a heart attack, and I went down. Then another horse kind of clipped me in my scapula and it fractured. And I mean, when I was in the hospital, I knew something was wrong because I've been through many spills before, and I know I had something that was gonna probably put me away for a couple of weeks. And yeah, definitely very upsetting. Then when the doctor told me I have a little fracture in my scapula, that it's going to require probably 4 weeks, to be out. I feel like, the world just collapsed on me. And you start thinking like, why this has to happen to me? Why at this time? Jesus, I couldn't understand it. But, I always, I guess, from so many injuries, I've been kind of learning how to deal with things like that and trying to see positive things, like in the long run. And just after that, I had to kind of, keep my cool and just try to recover as quick as I can just to be back on time. And I think I did that pretty well.
The good news is that you are back in time for the Super Bowl, right, for the Kentucky Derby. So that is the silver lining to this whole thing. And, you knew all along that Sovereignty was your horse. Did you ever worry that, okay, if he wins the Florida Derby with Manny Franco aboard, maybe you don't get back on him?
Like I was talking with Bill Mott after, he called me the day that I had the incident, and he called me the day after, when I got released from the hospital, and he said, like, listen, take your time and whatever the result is with Sovereignty, you ride him back. If you're back for the Derby, you'll get the mount back. And if you're, ready for the Derby, and whatever happens, all the horses you've been riding, you'll get back. You'll go back again to ride all your horses. So like he said to me, just don't worry. Just do whatever you need to do to recover. Like all those horses are pretty much yours. You get back. When you get back, you'll get to ride all those horses again. So that gave me a hell of a, big peace of mind. And I think that actually helps me to recover properly in the right way and put in a good effort to keep, getting better and better quicker. And, having the peace of mind, it was definitely a big help through my process of recovering.
Did you have any conversation with Manny before the Florida Derby, maybe going over what you know about Sovereignty as his regular rider that could help him in that particular race?
Yeah, he called me and I did kind of give him a couple tips. I can, really can say much. The guy wins more races than me every year. He's a hell of a rider. He's a professional. He knows what to do. But yeah, I just kind of did fill him up a little bit with what I think he likes to do with the horse, what I like to do with the horse normally in the post parade when I'm warming up, and normally when I'm riding it, what I feel like, and when he's ready, he'll probably do this and do that, and just kind of filling him in a little bit with what I normally feel with this horse, and he did a great job. I think that track just never have been a track that will benefit a horse like Sovereignty, and we never had a plan for him to run in any of those prep in Florida because we thought the track was never going to help him. But, we had a little hiccups, on the run while he was training, so we didn't have any other choices. They ended up running the Fountain of Youth and then the Florida Derby after. So, but that's how it worked out, and I think the horse still ran a very good race. We know that he wasn't pumped up and cranked up for that race. We thought he might be just still good enough to win that race, but I think the best is yet to come for him.
You talk about having the conversation with Manny, telling him about how the horse usually warms up and what you like to do there, and some of the other little key things that might have helped him when he was getting aboard for the first time. Junior, what are some of those things with Sovereignty, some of the key things you like to keep in mind when you get the leg up?
I like to warm it up, and then I get a good feeling right away because he's been the second time I rode him, he was close to the pace. Then the third time, when he broke his maiden in Churchill, he was actually very good that day. He just took a bat, when they opened the gate, he kind of spread his front legs and then did a little hop, and then we were last. And I think I get a good feeling on where he's going to be, like laying close or a little farther back just by the warm up. If it's a little quiet, doesn't mean he's not going to run good. I can feel the aggression that is going to be early in the race from him. And then after that, I never like to rush him. I don't think he liked that. I did that a couple of times with him, kind of like when he breaks, tried to rush him to put him somewhere close, and he kind of spit the beat on me right away, kind of letting me know, like, hey, don't rush me. I don't like that. He started kind of scrumbling his leg underneath me, and that's one thing I kind of learned from him, just to not rush and kind of help him out of there, but don't try to make him do something that he doesn't want to do it. And yeah, I just pretty much just leave him alone. He'll travel very well. He'll get good, take the kick back fine, and once again, I think normally, when he switch lead in the half a mile, he jumps in the bridle and he knows it's like, hey, from here, like, it's time to start going. And after that, you kind of measure it, how far you are, and you start letting it go little by little, and then until you turn for home and you unleash his power. He's very good at that.
This will be your sixth appearance in the Kentucky Derby. Your first one came in 2016 with Mo Heyman. You ended up finishing fourth that year. What have you learned over those previous 5 Derby experiences, Junior, that will help you with Sovereignty next Saturday?
To be honest, it's a race who, you have to have the I'll say, the right horse at the right day. They wanted to run at the right time, I guess. It's a tricky race. It's 20 horses that will never run with that many horses in a race. It's the only race in the country that, where you can have 20 horses in the race, and just a lot of things needs to go your way. You have to be very lucky, and once again, you have to have the horse that day and at the right time that he'll give the run that we all expected, but once again, you have to have a good trip at the same time, and everything has to kind of like fall into place in those 2 minutes of racing, and yeah, we'll try to do our best, and hopefully, everything, like I say, everything works out perfectly, and if he gives me the run that I know he's capable of, I think he's gonna be very, very tough and the Derby. I'm very, very excited to tour from home and be coming with him.
Yeah, one thing's for sure, he will finish when you ask him the question, as you talked about earlier. He's going to be running through the stretch. He's a horse that does come from further back. 20-horse field. I know traffic can be an issue. it is up to you to try to guide him through a clean trip like you were just talking about. What's more challenging, Junior, to have a horse that likes to be up on the lead and to try to nurse his speed so he doesn't go too fast? Or is it more challenging to have a horse like this where you have to weave through some traffic?
I think either one have their benefit and their cons. I think, if you're on the lead, you kind of easy out of trouble. Nobody's on your way, but you can get horses who will challenge you and make you go probably faster than what you than you want. And sometimes, you're doing an okay lead, and all of a sudden by the 3/8 pole, somebody start moving, they start rushing, then you have to start picking it up that early. That is, one con if you're in the lead, but if you're from behind, you can kind of see everything what's happening, make the move right when you think it's right to do it. You don't have to either do it too early or too late. You can kind of perfect, timing that right. But at the same time, if you're kind of in the middle of horses, and then when you start passing horses, there are horses they will try from the outside to keep you boxed in, and some other horses in front of you might start stopping quicker than you think, and then, you have to check there, and those little things, it's easy, but it's not easy, but that's, I guess, that's what we get paid for, and that's where we're professional. We had to figure it out very quick and try to stay out of trouble in a 20-horse field.
What's it like being in the jocks room waiting for the Kentucky Derby on Derby Day? What's it like for a rider?
Well, I'm going to speak about myself. I try to, you stay relaxed. I just like to watch the races throughout the day just to make sure, I don't missing anything sometimes about the track. Sometimes, those days, normally tracks seems to carry a little more speed. The track gets a little faster, and, just try to be paying attention what's happening through the day in the races. If the inside's good, the outside's good, or, like speed bias a little bit, try to pay attention a little bit of that so I don't get, don't get caught out of guard and do a wrong movement just because I didn't pay attention, the races earlier. But, then just try to stay kind of, as calm as I can, just kind of look. I will look at the races, few times just in case, but that's it. Just try to stay relaxed, I have to wait for my moment and make the best of it.
Is it easier to stay relaxed now than it was your first time in 2016?
Absolutely. Definitely, I have to say, I get more experience and, being able to ride with those guys for so many years, give you more confidence of, what to do in the race and what to expect, than the first time when you kind of like, it's unknown for you, first time riding with 20 horses and what everybody's doing or how everybody's acting, It's a little different race, It's a race where everybody kind of is a little more in edge, and when they leave the gate, everybody gets a little more aggressive. There is no break whatsoever. It's a little more wild than what it actually looks in TV, to be honest. But having 5 races, already, give me a little bit of idea of what to expect.
Put me in the saddle with you. Well, not literally, figuratively. Sovereignty would not want me in the saddle with you, I promise you that. Walking onto the track, the playing of my old Kentucky home. Tell me about those moments. What's that like?
Oh, no, that's always get me. Like, that gives me, like, the chills in my body. And if anybody else will tell you it doesn't, like, they will probably be lying. It's just, like, just an unbelievable feeling. And I can't even know how to explain that. It's just an unbelievable feeling, and then at the same time, you're so appreciated that, so many jockeys in the country, and, I'm the one of the 20 that are able to be in the biggest races in America, in the Derby, and it just make you, like be humble and realize how lucky I am, and yeah, it's just a unique experience. We only experience that once a year. The guys they're able to ride the Derby.
Junior, I think every kid growing up anywhere that wants to be a professional athlete, and that's certainly what jockeys are, they dream of that signature moment, maybe throwing a ball up into the air and hitting a baseball over the fence in the backyard and thinking, okay, that was 2 outs in the bottom of the 9th. I just won the World Series. Winning the Kentucky Derby is the same thing for a jockey. So do you let yourself think about what that moment might be like if Sovereignty crosses the line first next Saturday?
Yeah, I've been picturing it. You have to imagine it so you can make it happen. That's what I always say. You have to see yourself winning it so you can execute the plan and execute and so everything can be executed. But yes, I mean I have seen, especially with this horse, like I being very optimistic and always very positive with every horse that I've been coming into the Derby, but this is the one that I have given me more hope to be in the winner's circle and celebrate. And how that's gonna be, I don't know. I will have to be in the moment, but definitely I mean I've been really dreaming about winning this race with this horse, to be honest.
Well, I know your family will be there with you, and Junior, I hope you get the opportunity to celebrate with them after the 1.25 mile journey next Saturday. All the best, my friend. Safe trip every time you get a leg up, and let's go get it done next Saturday.
Yeah, thank you very much.
All right, buddy. Jockey Junior Alvarado here on HRRN. Yeah, really special horse, really talented horse. I love the fact that Hall of Fame trainer Bill Mott told him when he was injured before the Florida Derby, hey, you're my guy. You want to talk about taking pressure off of a jockey, right? Junior said now he could rehab and get back to health properly. He didn't have to try to rush himself back thinking, oh, my goodness, I'm going to lose this mount, and I love this horse so much, and I'm not going to be able to ride him. Kudos to Bill Mott for that. Fantastic stuff. Great conversation with Junior. Really appreciate him taking the time. Coming up next is time for this week's edition of Calling All 3-Year-Olds, presented by Spendthrift, and then I'll tell you what's ahead in hour 2. Plenty more Derby conversation coming your way. This is the Equine Forum on the Horse Racing Radio Network.